It's a stormy evening over São Paulo. An Airbus A320 approaches Congonhas, one of Brazil's busiest airports. On board, 187 people are anxious to get down. But as the plane touches down, the disaster just starts to begin. The plane doesn't slow down. It seems as if all the brakes have failed. Are the pilots able to stop the plane before the deadly drop-off? What you're about to watch is not a story about rain or an aircraft failure. It's a story about people and how they work in high-stress situations. This is the story of TAM Flight 3054. Our story begins roughly 90 minutes before the disaster, far in the south of Brazil, at Porto Alegre Airport. It is late afternoon, and boarding for Flight 3054 to São Paulo is well underway. In the Airbus A320 with registration Papa Romeo Mike Bravo Kilo, there is a sense of busy routine. The aircraft is completely full. 181 passengers store their carry-on bags, fasten their seatbelts, and prepare for the short domestic flight. Most of them are Brazilian, businessmen, families, students, but there are also passengers from France, Argentina, the United States, South Africa, Portugal, and Sweden on board. The cabin crew, made up of 4 experienced flight attendants, carry out their routine safety checks. Even the 2 jump seats in the cockpit, directly behind the pilots, are occupied that evening by airline employees commuting home. The aircraft itself is a 9-year-old Airbus A320 and has safely completed tens of thousands of flights. It is a so-called fly-by-wire aircraft. This means that when the pilot moves the side stick, he is not pulling physical steel cables connected to the wings. Instead, he sends electronic signals to powerful onboard computers. These computers interpret the pilot's commands and move the aircraft's control surfaces in a way that keeps the airplane within safe aerodynamic limits. But on this July 17th, the aircraft is flying with a known and documented handicap. An aircraft of this size is equipped with a thrust reverser on each engine. During landing, large panels on the sides of the engines open and redirect the powerful exhaust stream, which normally pushes the aircraft forward, toward the nose of the airplane. This reversed thrust acts like a gigantic air brake and helps slow the aircraft down on the runway. For several days, the right engine, engine number 2, had been leaking hydraulic fluid in precisely this mechanism. Because safety and efficiency in aviation often exist in a delicate balance, TAM Airlines maintenance crews made a routine decision. Since the replacement part was not immediately available and the flight schedule was under pressure, they deactivated the thrust reverser on the right engine. In the left seat, the captain's seat, sits 53-year-old Captain Henrique Stefanini di Sacco. He is the pilot flying, the man actively controlling the aircraft tonight. Di Sacco is a veteran. He has spent nearly 14,000 hours in the air, including 2,000 hours specifically on the Airbus A320. His colleagues describe him as calm, friendly, and extremely dutiful. He's the kind of pilot who loves manuals. He memorizes procedures down to the smallest detail. But hidden within his training records is a small but significant note from his instructors. Di Sacco is not a master of improvisation. When situations suddenly change dramatically, when the standard plan collapses, he tends to develop tunnel vision. He needs slightly longer to adapt to unexpected emergencies. His solution to this weakness is strict adherence to procedure. He believes, if you follow the manual, you do not make mistakes. Beside him, in the right seat, sits 54-year-old Kleiber Aguiar Lima. On this flight, Lima serves as the pilot monitoring. His job is to handle radio communications, read checklists, and monitor both the instruments and his colleague. Lima is even more experienced than Di Sacco. He has spent half his life in cockpits. But there is a catch. For most of his career, Lima was a Boeing man. Boeing aircraft are more mechanical, more direct. The pilot is the undisputed master of the machine. Only recently had Lima transferred to TAM's Airbus fleet and completed his transition training on the highly automated Airbus A320. He had accumulated only around 200 hours on this technologically complex aircraft. He was still learning to fully internalize the logic, the language of the Airbus computer systems. To an outsider, having two captains in the cockpit sounds like double the safety. But in aviation psychology, this can create what is known as a flat authority gradient. When a first officer is significantly younger and less experienced than the captain, the hierarchy is crystal clear. But when two dominant, highly experienced captains fly together, that clarity can blur. The reason TAM Airlines is even assigning two captains to this flight lies in the airline's explosive growth. TAM has expanded at an extraordinary pace over the last 4 years. The company opened new routes, purchased new aircraft, and simply ended up with too many captains and too few first officers. At 5:20 p.m. local time, all preparations are complete. Flight 3054 taxis toward the runway. The aircraft is heavy, very heavy. The pilots have decided to load 2.5 tons more fuel than the short flight to São Paulo actually requires. This practice is known as tankering. The reason is simple and economic. Fuel is cheaper in Porto Alegre than it is in São Paulo. TAM management appreciates it when pilots carry cheaper fuel to save money. At the same time, the extra fuel gives the pilots a tactical advantage. The weather forecasts along their route are terrible. A massive storm front stretches across southern Brazil. With an additional 2.5 tons of kerosene on board, Disaco and Lima have more time in the air. They can fly around storm cells, or, if São Paulo descends into chaos, hold in a waiting pattern without immediately worrying about running low on fuel. But this additional weight comes at a cost. A heavier aircraft lands at a higher speed. It carries more kinetic energy, and it requires a significantly longer distance to stop. The Airbus lines up on the runway. The pilot pushes the thrust levers into the takeoff position, and the powerful CFM56 engines roar to life. The aircraft begins accelerating down the runway. At rotation speed, the pilots lift the nose, and the Airbus climbs into the gray sky. After takeoff, the pilots retract the landing gear, and everything appears to be according to plan. The flight is turbulent from the very first minutes. The pilots have been cleared to climb to flight level 210, approximately 21,000 feet. But they are flying directly into a storm of violent weather. On their cockpit weather radar, enormous red areas appear, the unmistakable sign of powerful thunderstorm cells. Thunderstorms are the absolute enemy of commercial aviation. Inside them, updrafts and downdrafts can become so violent that they toss even a modern jet around like a toy, or in the worst case, threaten the structural integrity of the wings themselves. Captain Lima grabs the radio. He requests a deviation to the east to avoid the worst storm cells. Air traffic control approves the request. Disaco turns the aircraft and the jet banks, but it helps very little. The turbulence is brutal. In the cabin, passengers grip their armrests. The seatbelt sign remains illuminated continuously. And while they battle through this weather chaos, Disaco and Lima receive updated weather information for their destination airport, São Paulo Congonhas. A heavy rain shower has soaked São Paulo. The cloud ceiling hangs extremely low at just 900 feet. And worst of all, the airport reported standing water on runway 35. The runway 35 left in São Paulo had only recently been resurfaced and repaved. It was smooth, level, and flawless. But that perfection was its deadly flaw. The construction work had not yet been fully completed. the runway still lacked something called grooving. Grooving involves cutting small transverse channels into the asphalt. These grooves serve one life-saving purpose. When it rains, they channel water away from beneath the aircraft tires under immense pressure. Without these grooves, something extremely dangerous happens during heavy rain. Water accumulates on the perfectly smooth surface. When an aircraft traveling at more than 250 kilometers per hour hits that layer of water, the tires can no longer push it aside. They lose contact with the asphalt. The aircraft no longer rolls, it surfs. It becomes a gigantic, uncontrollable sled. This phenomenon is known as hydroplaning. The plane finally reaches its cruising altitude and experiences less stress from turbulence and bad weather. The pilots planned their descent and programmed the flight management computer. They calculated that even with only one thrust reverser available and a wet runway, the required stopping distance was still significantly shorter than the runway at Congonhas. Despite this, the pilots were still worried about the short runway. Congonhas Airport is not a normal airport. It is located in the middle of the city of São Paulo, surrounded by high-rise buildings. The airport is built on a plateau, and beyond the end of the runway, there is a steep 15-meter drop. Because of this, pilots often say that landing at Congonhas is like landing on an aircraft carrier. The 1,800-meter runway is relatively short, but it is still within the operating limits of the Airbus A320. However, the pilots are even more concerned because just 24 hours before their own flight, a Pantanal Airlines turboprop aircraft hydroplaned on this same wet, ungrooved runway. The aircraft slid uncontrollably across the grass and barely missing the deadly drop-off. No one was killed, but the aircraft was destroyed. The pilots start their descent into São Paulo. The weather is still very turbulent, and the pilots begin their landing preparation. This includes arming the speed brakes, also known as spoilers. The speed brakes help the aircraft slow down. They are large panels on the wings that deploy after touchdown. The sun over São Paulo has already disappeared. The night is pitch black, swallowed by dense storm clouds. Flight 3054 is established on the ILS glide path. The autopilot is engaged. The windshield wipers whip across the glass at maximum speed, barely able to clear the water. The pilots lower the landing gear. A deep rumble shakes through the cabin as the landing gear extends into the airflow. At 1,000 feet, the A320 suddenly bursts beneath the low cloud layer. Below them, the city of São Paulo. Streets, cars, buildings. Everything blurs in the rain. The conditions are harsh, but everything is going according to plan. The pilots receive landing clearance from the control tower. They ask the controller if the runway is slippery, and the controller replies, "Yes, it is." Finally, the pilots can see the runway, and DeSacco disconnects the autopilot. From this point forward, he is hand-flying 60 tons of aircraft. As the plane gets closer to the runway, the radar altimeter begins its countdown.
120.
DeSacco gently raises the nose of the aircraft to arrest the descent. Then the Airbus computer calls out,
Retard, retard.
This means the pilots must move both thrust levers to the idle position. After touchdown, they can pull the thrust levers further back into the reverse thrust detent. In this case, due to maintenance, only the left thrust lever will be moved. But DeSacco makes a crucial mistake. He only moves the left thrust lever. The right one remains untouched. The rear wheels of the Airbus touch the wet asphalt of Congonhas. But the Airbus detects that one thrust lever is not an idle. The Airbus computers think that the pilot maybe will go around, so the Airbus doesn't deploy speed brakes or the auto brakes. 1 second after touchdown, DeSacco pulls the left lever even farther back into full reverse thrust. The left engine roars as the reverser buckets deploy, blasting tons of air forward to slow the aircraft. But engaging reverse thrust has another effect. It disconnects the aircraft's auto-thrust system. Engine number 2, the right engine, which until now had been gently controlled by the auto throttle, suddenly receives the direct, unfiltered command of the physical thrust lever. And that lever is still set to climb. The right engine screams to life. Now the A320 is experiencing differential thrust. One engine gives reverse thrust. The other engine is working on a high power setting. The pilots need their rudder pedals to stay on the center line. They realized something was wrong. They start to apply maximum manual braking through their rudder pedals, but the speed doesn't decrease. Co-pilot Lima looks at his displays. "Reverse number 1 only," he shouts. Reverse thrust on engine 1 is active. He looks at the spoiler indications. "Spoilers?" "Nothing!" Lima yells in panic. No spoilers. The pilots just need to look at the thrust levers to spot the problem, but the cockpit is dark, and under this high-stress situation, the pilots simply don't recognize that engine 2 is giving full power. Additionally, the runway is wet, the tires have less grip, and hydroplaning is very likely. Another problem is that the plane is traveling near 140 knots, the speed at which the A320 would normally take off. So the wings are generating lift, particularly because of the running engine, meaning less weight is on the runway, and the tires produce even less grip. "I can't control it," DeSacco screams. "Decelerate! Decelerate!" Lima shouts back. At this speed, the plane will be at the end of the runway in less than 30 seconds. But at this moment, it is too late. The plane is just 500 meters before the runway end and still over 100 knots fast. Then, the Airbus makes a sharp turn to the left and veers off the runway. The right engine at near full power is too strong to keep the airplane on the runway. The front landing gear touches grass, the main landing gear too. And the pilots still don't get that one engine is running on full power. Then, at a speed of 180 kilometers per hour, the wheels of the Airbus leave the ground. But not flying, but falling. The plane falls over a street into an office building from TAM Airlines. The jet erupted into a massive fireball as thousands of liters of fuel ignited. The crash took 187 lives on board the plane and 12 on the ground. The subsequent investigation exposed a lethal chain of events. The newly resurfaced runway completely lacked proper water drainage grooves and crucial safety overrun areas. Compounding this infrastructure failure was a fatal human and mechanical error. One of the plane's thrust reversers was deactivated, and the pilots inadvertently left that engine's throttle in the climb position. Instead of braking, the jet accelerated asymmetrically, making it impossible to stop.